welcome to the show. This week I've got a goalkeeper with us. He's a big fella, but then you have to be a goalkeeper. Once upon a time, England had goalkeepers who were 5'8" and 5'9", but not anymore. It's land of the giants. But this fella was a big guy. He played international football, and most of his career was played at Walsall, though he did have the odd sojourn here and there. Mick Kearns, welcome to the programme. You are, of course, from Banbury originally, aren't you?
I was brought up in Banbury, yeah, down in Oxfordshire. 4 brothers. My parents moved over from Ireland in the late 40s, and I was brought up there. And
you were not the only one to play professional football in the family, were you?
No, my brother Oliver also played. A brother called Eamon who played part-time, so money from the game outside the Football League, but Ollie had a decent career with Hereford, Reading, Oxford, and had a season at Walsall also.
He scored a lot of goals, didn't he? I remember him. When you said Oliver, I was quite thrown. I'd never heard him call that before. It was always Ollie Kearns, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, my mother always called him Oliver, and we always called him Oliver. But, yeah, you know, your names get shortened. A bit like myself, Mick in football, but Michael from my mother.
Did you and Ollie play together as youngsters then?
Yeah, we would have done. Yeah, I mean, listen, football wasn't as organised in those days. You didn't have, you know, youth teams and young teams. You put the jumpers down for goalposts in those days and played in the park, and we played regularly, but we didn't play in the same junior team.
Were you a goalkeeper, or did they make you a goalkeeper because were you a big lad even then?
Yes. I remember I was 6'1" at 14. I can't remember what height I was below that, younger than that, but no, I always had aspirations of being a goalkeeper. At those days, you play outfield as well, but I think as you get older, you find a position that you become more natural to.
So you preferred being a goalkeeper to studying, did you?
Yes, I'd have to say that, because I certainly underachieved academically and as a scholar, because all I wanted to do was be a professional footballer, as a lot of kids do growing up. And I can remember a school teacher advising me one day, you know, to forget about any aspirations of being a professional footballer, because you will not make it as a professional footballer, and try and concentrate on another career. But thankfully I didn't take his advice.
Was Ollie of the same mindset, was he?
Yeah, I think he was. He came in a little bit later. He didn't do an apprenticeship. He was an apprenticed electrician. But then he started scoring a few goals for, I think it was Banbury United, and Reading spotted him and signed him from there.
You were lucky you've never had a proper job, have you?
Well, loads of people say that to me. Yes, I've never had a proper job, and
that's 2 of us.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So how did you get then from jumpers for goalposts to actually playing the game professionally?
I was very fortunate in the sense that the year that I left school was the first year Oxford United were having a youth team. So I can remember going with another pal from Banbury, and we went and had a trial at Oxford. And it was on a Sunday afternoon. Well, must have been pressed, because I got asked to come back the following Sunday. And then I was signed on as an amateur. And at that time, Oxford had about 6 apprentices, and then I was playing along, you know, as an amateur, having just left school, and then I worked up the courage to go and see Arthur Turner, who was the manager at that time, and asked him would he consider me signing as an apprentice. So he said, come and see me next week, and I went in, and he must have thought that I was good enough to sign apprentice. He asked me to go home and discuss it with my father, and that wasn't much of a discussion. I just told my father what I was going to do. And,
really?
Yeah. And he was very supportive, and then I signed on as an apprentice then the following week.
You said you plucked up the courage to go and ask him. Was he that sort of guy? I've never met him.
Yeah, Arthur Turner. The only time you ever knew that you had a good game playing under Arthur Turner was if he didn't say anything to you. He would go, you'd all be just sitting around in the dressing rooms, and he'd go to every single one in the dressing room, and if he stopped where you were sitting, you knew you were in for a rollicking of some sort. But if he walked straight past you, you'd have a sigh of relief, thinking, well, I must have played well in his eyes.
Do you feel a sort of great excitement when you got your first opportunity then?
In the first team, very much so. I can remember that it wasn't very straightforward. My debut for Oxford, it was on a Good Friday, and Jim Barron, who was the goalkeeper at Oxford at the time, had a problem with something like an ingrown toenail or something. But Jim had played on with it. Well, obviously it got worse, and then the club doctor came, and I think I was in a cafeteria type place within the ground, halfway through a meat and potato pie, and there was an announcement: would Mick Kearns please go to the dressing room? This was about an hour before kick-off.
Yeah.
So, what have I done wrong?
You finished the pie?
No. The first thing I'm thinking of is, what have I done wrong?
Yeah.
So I go up to the dressing room. Jerry Summers is the manager, and he said, over there, you're playing. Playing? You know, I just couldn't believe this had happened. Because Jim had been playing in a little bit of pain, I know that, but the doctor must have took one look at his toe on this particular occasion and thought, no, you can't play. So I was thrust into that. I can remember playing Leicester City in my debut, and Peter Shilton was in goal for Leicester, and we lost 1-0 at home. In those days, because it was over Easter, that was on Good Friday. If you don't have time then, and I knew I would be playing over the Christmas period, and we played away at Cardiff City, and it was a time when John Toshak and Brian Clark was up front, and Jimmy Schooler, I think, was the manager, and we went there, and they were at the top of the league, which was it was the second division then, but it was now the Championship, and we drew 0-0. And you know, I played quite well, and then they kept me in the team for the following Tuesday, and that was away at Villa Park.
Nice little start for you.
Yes, it was a terrific start, and a pleasing start, because we drew 0-0 there, and it was a time when George Curtis was playing, Chico Hamilton, Andy Lockhead was up front for them. So we're going back to the around 1970-71, and it was quite ironic that 0-0 was in a season where Villa got relegated to what is now the first division. In those days was the third division, and being brought up in Banbury with lots of Villa supporters, and you can't believe it, when they got relegated they blamed me for it, because they got relegated by 1 point or something, so I got the blame for them.
That seems fair enough. And so you played those three, and then you were
yes, and listen, I was so disappointed, you know, because I thought I played well, but no, of course, Jerry Summers was absolutely right, you know, to bring back the experienced goalkeeper. But obviously I'd shown enough, because I think it was at the end of that season, Jim was sold to Nottingham Forest, and I took over from him.
I'm just thinking, when you played Aston Villa and Andy Lockhead was up there, he was what shall I say, a combative player, wasn't he?
Yes, and I knew all about it.
Imagine him coming towards you, but I mean, you're a big lad. How tall were you then?
Well, I wasn't so wide in those days,
fair
Bob,
enough,
but
okay.
I was equally as tall. I can remember getting battered by him, and George Curtis running all over my back as I lay on the floor with the ball. But that was what they used to do in those days, and nobody would have battered an eyelid. But yes, I got battered and bruised, but listen, that was what I came into football for. Not to get battered and bruised, but to experience that part of it. Yeah.
Did you think about retaliating first?
No.
No. I wouldn't have
Never
done
been in
I
my
wouldn't have done with
nature.
George.
I don't think I would have
No.
handled myself very well.
But there you are. I mean, you know, even if it was just the 3 games at that, I mean, it was a great start, and there were good matches, weren't they, to have played?
Fantastic matches.
Leicester, Cardiff, and Aston Villa. I mean,
yeah, brilliant matches to have come into. You couldn't have asked for better ones than that, because they were all top teams of that second division, as it was in those days.
I'm trying to think back then. As you say, it was a very, very different game, wasn't it, to the one we see now?
Yeah, very, very different. I mean, today, you know, most players are far more dedicated. They're more like athletes today. There's a lot more pace to the game. Players are a lot quicker. Whether there's more skill or not, I'm not sure, because there were a lot of skillful players in those days.
Yes.
So, you know, that's a debate as to whether they're more skillful. But is it more entertaining? You know, that's in the eye of the beholder, of course.
The game has changed markedly, as we know, but the basics of goalkeeping haven't, have they?
No, they haven't. I mean, you described me as 6'4", and all goalkeepers now are tall, but it's all about keeping the ball out of the net. I mean, we had a goalkeeper at Walsall, Jimmy Walker, who was 5'10"-ish, but he was a terrific goalkeeper. His timing was excellent. It has to be if you're a small goalkeeper, particularly if you're coming for crosses. And it's all about keeping the ball out of the net, really.
Yeah. I mean, I was just saying, in the era that you grew up in, England goalkeepers, they were all 5'8", 5'9", weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, Gordon Banks,
yeah,
who's the best I ever saw. Wasn't blessed with, you know, a large degree, you know, height-wise.
Yeah.
You know, Pat Jennings was, Ray Clements was, Peter Shilton. No, he would have been around about the same size as Gordon. But
Gordon Banks was so agile, wasn't he?
He was fantastic. He made goalkeeping look very easy. You know, a shot would come in, it'd be a terrific shot from the right, you know, from the right-hand side, say, and he'd just catch it nonchalantly and throw it out to the left back. Whereas you'd had other goalkeepers doing somersaults, tipping it over the bar and making it look flashy. But he would make the game look easy.
You said you lived your young life in Banbury, and you've just mentioned that there were a lot of Aston Villa fans there. Were you a Villa supporter as a boy?
Funnily enough, growing up I was a Wolves fan. And I think I was a Wolves fan right from probably one of the early matches I ever saw was the 1960 Cup final. And I remember seeing it, I think it was the first year we even had a television in the house. And watched it, Norman Dealey scoring a couple of goals. And, you know, I've been hooked on football before that because of playing at school. But, you know, not every house had a television in those days. And watched the 1960 Cup final, and I was hooked then on Wolves, really.
And what about hero goalkeepers? Who were your favourites?
Gordon Banks, I'd have to say, was, you know, because as I was, you know, watching, being a school lad, he was always my hero, and he's still the best, in my opinion. However, then it graduated to people like Pat Jennings, Peter Shilton, Ray Clements, and if you look at all three of those goalkeepers, they had three, you know, if their main attributes would have been three different ones from those three goalkeepers, and really you couldn't split all three of those. Everybody would have an opinion, and whoever's opinion would probably is right, because there's a fair argument to put for all three of them.
It's interesting that you mentioned a few minutes ago about the athleticism of players today, but goalkeeping hasn't changed. I remember Gordon Banks telling me that when he played as an amateur, that his weekly job was he worked for a coal merchant, and he was taking bags of coal off the back of lorries, and he said that helped him build his upper strength and in his arms.
Yeah.
I mean, players today, young players, they would just look at him. Well, they wouldn't know what a coal lorry was, would they, for starters?
No.
But I mean, they would just be amazed that was how it was.
Yeah.
Did he have to have something in him that made him particularly good? I mean, you've obviously got to have good eyesight and be pretty nimble.
Natural ability. Really, I mean, if you looked at him, he was a very natural goalkeeper. He was very good shots that were low down. He was good, you know, high up. He was terrific like that. I have to say that, in my opinion, I wasn't blessed with great ability as a goalkeeper. Where I think my strengths were that I had to work very, very hard at becoming, you know, a reasonably successful goalkeeper. But I think my strength was my communication with the back four. I could organise my back four well, and I think that was probably my strength. But you know, Gordon Banks. It's interesting you say about him, you know, carrying bags of coal. That was probably his weights. You know, players in my coal used to lift huge, big weights. Nowadays they lift weights, but much smaller weights, and make the muscles more resilient. But nowadays, you know, you used to have huge, big, really like shot putters.
But as I say, in his case, it was bags of coal, and it certainly did the trick for him. So, and I suppose the saving the World Cup
Yeah.
From Pele, that's the moment, isn't it? We all remember.
Well, it is, and you know, listen, Gordon made a lot of good saves throughout his career, but it's obvious a huge game like that in the World Cup, that'll always be highlighted, but he made some fantastic saves, and it wasn't all, like I say, it wasn't all about making saves. He quite often made the game look very, very easy.
Well, we'll move on and talk about your career at Walsall in the next part of the programme. But for the moment, Mick Kearns, thank you very much. Interesting to hear how your career started and how you got because of a man with a bad toe, you got your first opportunity to play in league football. That's all to come. For the moment, here's the break. So how long did it take you to get to the notice of international selectors then?
Well, obviously I must have been performing well for Oxford, and I think word got out that both my parents were from the west coast of Ireland, County Mayo, and they sent somebody over. In those days, it would have been committees that would have picked the squad. It was peculiar. Yeah. And they sent somebody across. Obviously, they thought I was okay and would like to be putting me into the squad. And I got into a squad, and it was against Poland. The match was against Poland, and they put me on in the second half.
Who was the manager then?
Mike Megan.
Wow.
Now,
you've come up with a name I don't know, so you've done
played for Everton.
Oh yes, I do.
For years, Mick Megan, and he put me on at half time, and the one thing I remember about that game, the adrenaline was flowing so much. I picked up the ball and bounced it, and then kicked it down the field. One bounce, and it went over the bar. Incredible! I've never, never had a kick anywhere like it since, and it was just pure adrenaline. Yeah. And of course, as the years went by, Ireland supporters remembered it. So every time I got the ball, they wanted me to kick the ball. Well, of course, then wherever I had most of my caps was with Johnny Giles. Well, you didn't kick the ball under John because he wanted you to throw it out every single time. Of course, the crowd were cheering, and I didn't, and they'd be boo, you know. But
so that first game you came on for Alan Kelly, you were telling me, yes.
That's right.
Was that to give you a run out,
or
was it? Yes.
I think that's what it was.
Did you win? Do you remember?
I didn't let a goal in.
Right.
I remember that.
But had Alan let a goal in earlier in the game?
I got a feeling it was 0-0, but I can't be sure about that. Passage of time has caught up with it.
But I mean, terrific experience, and as you say, I mean, then you were playing for Oxford, so you were not playing at the highest level.
No. And then as I progressed, I think I got injured and then couldn't play, and then eventually I got back in when I was playing for Walsall. But then the majority of my caps were under Johnny Giles. And when I think back now, I didn't think about it at the time, funnily enough, but when I think back now, I was playing for Walsall in the 3rd division, in the league they're in now.
Which is League One for those who are young.
Yes, and everybody I was playing with were playing with teams at the top of the Premier League.
Really?
I mean, players like Liam Brady, Johnny Giles, Frank Stapleton, Dave O'Leary, Mark Lawrence, and Steve Highway. I mean, you know, and there was me playing for Walsall, and it was great. Oh, I loved it. I really did love it, and I look forward to every opportunity I had.
Who was the other goalkeeper in your squad at the time
then? At that time, it was most of the time it was Paddy Roach from Manchester United. There was Jerry Payton, who played for Burnley, Fulham. They were mostly they were
Yes,
mostly
yeah.
the goalkeepers.
But clearly John and others had faith in you as their goalkeeper.
Well, the thing is, like anything in football and anything in sport, if you're doing well, it's very difficult to dislodge that person that's in goal. And I have to say, I was quite consistent when I played for. All right, I had great players playing in front of me, protecting me a lot of the time, and I wouldn't have had too much to do, I'm sure. But you know, it's like all sports. If you're doing okay, you know, why change a winning team?
So did you ever find yourself sort of wandering around the 6-yard area as goalkeepers do, and looking in front and seeing the best of Chippy Brady and Frank Stapleton and all the rest of them, and thinking, I quite like this. This will do me.
I did. I have to be honest. But you couldn't get too carried away. You had a job of work to do. If your head's got up in the clouds or something like that, you know, that was when it was going to hurt you. Something would happen that would hurt you. Yes. But I have to say, it probably wasn't happening too much when I was playing, but when you get back in the dressing room afterwards and you look round and you've just beaten somebody and you look round the dressing room and you think I used to think to myself how lucky I was to be in that situation.
You wonder if any young goalkeeper would think that today?
Well, hopefully a young goalkeeper will get that opportunity. And the first thing he'll think about is how lucky he was to be in that situation, and then to enjoy it, because I thoroughly enjoyed it.
But the point is that you were enjoying it at the time, whereas you think, you know, you talk to a lot of them now and they say, oh, you know, I wish I'd done this and done that when I was playing and I didn't realise. You clearly realised at that time, you know, in your 20s.
The thing is, I was lucky. Listen, I was playing for Oxford and Walsall, with all due respect to those teams, and I'm going out with people who, you know, challenging to win what is now the Premier League. You know, it was a different world, really. But I never treated them any differently on the field, and they never treated me any differently on the field. We were 11 players out on that pitch trying to beat the opposition to qualify for whatever competition it was we were in.
Were you ever tempted at that stage to write a letter to the school teacher who said, Michael, you will not make it as a professional footballer, find yourself a proper job?
No, I wasn't really, because listen, I knew where he was. I knew where he was coming from in that, because it is, you know, highly unlikely. Absolutely, and been properly advised. But I will always say, and I think a lot of professional footballers will say, how lucky we have been to have been in a career of choice, and you know, suffered very few injuries, and come through it. You've got to have a certain amount of luck to get there in the first place, I would say.
I mean, given that you said earlier that your parents had come to this country in the 40s, England that is, from the west coast of Ireland, I don't know how often you went back there, but did you feel you were part of the Irish team? Did you feel Irish when you were playing for them?
Yes. Yes, very much so. My parents were very proud. I mean, I'll give you, for instance, if you'll allow me to do that. My father was very, very proud of me, but he would have seen me play on very few occasions throughout my career. Very few occasions. You probably could have counted them on two hands. But he got word that I was playing, and in those days there was no mobile phones or no communication, email or anything like that. And he got word that I was playing, and anyway, I phoned him up the following day to say, Dad, I don't know whether you knew, because in those days there was no Sky, there was no, you picked it up on the newspaper, really. I played. He said, I know. I said, what do you mean? How do you mean? Yeah. He'd come over, he got on the boat, came across to Dublin to watch the match, and was back home by the time I'd phoned him, and he'd come over and watch the match. I didn't even know he was there. But that was typical of my father. He was very, very low-key. You know, he was very proud, and I knew he was proud, because I used to meet people in the town who'd say, oh, your dad told me this, and your dad told me that. I hadn't even told him, you know, so he was very low-key.
I mean, that's a lovely story, that, isn't it? Because, I mean, now, a lot of families would be queuing up asking for tickets.
That's right, absolutely.
And they would say,
yeah.
And he probably sat in the stand and didn't say anything to
No,
anybody.
he wouldn't have said a word. He went. He'd have gone up on the train to Holyhead, across to Dunleary, watched the game, bought his ticket, on the train back, and that would have been it. Nobody would have known. But you've got to know my father to realise that's the way he is. Yeah.
And what was Ollie's view? I mean, he, as you say, did play for Reading. He got a lot of goals in his time, but was he sort of just proud of you that you'd done?
Yeah, I think so. He enjoyed that fact, but he didn't quite get the opportunity. Props because of the quality of strikers that were around at his time.
Because it's a strange life, isn't it? As a goalkeeper, you are waiting for the other guy to get injured, get sent off, or something like this. And yet there's this great camaraderie, isn't there? You know, the goalkeepers' union you hear about.
Yeah.
Even a guy who's warmed the bench for so many matches now, they're still the biggest of mates, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And of course, I went into coaching after finishing, and then took goalkeepers at Walsall and Wolves when I was there, and yes, that camaraderie is still there, and there is genuine warmth in when they appreciate them playing well. It's peculiar, really. I think in most walks of life, they can't wait to take your place or something, but there is genuine camaraderie with goalkeepers. Because
nowadays, with almost everybody having a goalkeeper on the bench, if the other one gets sent off, he comes off, it's put the gloves on, bit of this, and then the next thing he's probably fishing the ball out the net from the penalty, isn't he?
That's exactly it. And of course, in my day, you never had anything like that.
No.
I mean, you could now in those days, what some of the things that went up, you'd be regarded as assault in football today. That's another reason why the game has moved on.
No red cards ever?
No. Booked occasionally.
Yes. Was that for exchanging pleasantries with the referee, or?
No, I can remember one booking I had at. In fact, two of the bookings, I had 3 bookings that I can remember. 2 of them were from concussion. And I had concussion, and I can remember at Swindon in particular, I put the ball down, and goalkeepers, nowadays you have to come off, don't you? But in those days, you know how daft we are as goalkeepers. People are quite right when they say things like that. But I put the ball down, and I could see it moving. And it was like, I was trying to focus, and we were winning the match. And of course, it was late in the second half, the referee came up and booked me. About 10 minutes later, we're in the dressing room, I collapsed and got taken to the hospital.
Survived to tell the tale.
And then the other time was, I was playing an international, Dave O'Leary had gone off, been carried off injured.
So you've got your time under your belt, you're doing well at Oxford, and the chance of a move came.
Yeah, came to Walsall, and I have to say I would regard that as the best move I've ever made. I came to Walsall. I think I was fortunate that in moving to Walsall, I settled in Aldridge, which is a lovely village. We call it a village, although it's right connected to Walsall, and very much still a village atmosphere. And I put it down to the fact that I was fortunate enough to have chosen Aldridge, to buy a house in Aldridge, and got some terrific friends there. And you know, lots of footballers when they finish playing end up going back to, you know, where they've been brought up, you know, where families are and stuff like that. But I didn't. I decided to stay in Aldridge, and because of how well settled I was.
So who was the manager of Walsall when you signed for them?
Ronnie Allen.
Right.
1973, July 1973. Ken Weldon had taken over, I think, the season before as chairman, and Ronnie Allen was appointed during that, either the end of that season or during that summer, and Ronnie Allen signed me from Oxford.
How long was it before you took over, as it were, as the regular goalkeeper?
At Walsall, I came in as the number 1 goalkeeper.
Right.
At that time, yeah.
And what were those early days like?
Fantastic. Really, I knew within a very short period of time that I'd made the right move. I was welcomed into the club by the players that were already there, and you know, we started getting the makings of a good team. We didn't really have that good a season. In actual fact, Ronnie Allen did get the sack, I think certainly before Christmas, and Doug Fraser took over as player manager, who we'd signed from Nottingham Forest. And you know, we never hit any high spots in the league in all the time I was at Walsall. However, the tradition that the club had had in FA Cups and things like that continued in that period that I was there.
And indeed, you played against Arsenal, didn't you?
Yes. I'd retired. You're talking about the second time,
yes.
when we beat Arsenal.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd actually retired and come out of retirement when we beat them at Highbury. Now, quite often, if a team from the lower divisions beats a top team, there could be a number of reasons for it. You know, the top team, like Arsenal in this case, would play well below their form. We'd have played out of our skin. They'd have hit the post 4 or 5 times, had 3 or 4 goals offside, and we'd have pinched a goal. Well, that game was never like that. We were the better side from the first whistle to the last whistle, and we played them off the park, and it wasn't a fluke at all. We were by far the better side. In fact, I went there as the visiting goalkeeper, coming out of retirement, because at the time I was the steward of Aldridge Conservative Club, and thankfully my back four protected me well, and we ended up winning the game.
Who was in that team then? I mean,
But the Arsenal team.
Yeah, I mean that was some performance.
Well,
wasn't
Pat Jennings, David O'Leary, Stuart Robson. You caught me out with that question.
It's not
but it was a strong side. It wasn't one of these weakened sides.
No.
And we did literally play them off the park. People like David Priest was fantastic that night, and Ali Brown scored the winning goal, and it was a tremendous achievement.
As you say, you, as a club, never hugely hit the high spots in the league, Walsall, but they've had some good players over the years, haven't they?
Very good players. Alan Clark is a notable one who went on to play for England, of course. Alan Buckley was a terrific player. Yeah, there've been really good players at Walsall. David Priest, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, good players.
But when you look at somebody like Alan Clark, when you saw him as a young player, did you immediately see something different about him?
Well, he'd moved on from Walsall when I joined. The thing about Alan Clark was, if there was a chance, he took it. You know, he wouldn't. He looked a bit ungamely. He was good. His touch was good. But the thing about him, if he had a chance, he took it, and that's what made him a terrific player.
So, you say cup matches were what made the club to some extent. What was your best ever game, do you think, for Walsall?
There's one game that stands out as a highlight to me in terms of performance. I can't remember what year it was. It was certainly early 70s, and we got drawn against Chesterfield in the FA Cup. I can't remember whether it was the first game was at home or it was away. And the reason why I say that, it went to what doesn't happen now, to a second replay would always be played on a neutral ground. Right. So we drew a game at Walsall, for instance, and then we drew away at Chesterfield. Then we played on a neutral ground, which in those days we played at the baseball ground, Derby's pitch. Now, what was hugely significant about this tie was, both Chesterfield and us, we knew we were playing Man United at Old Trafford in the next round. So it was vital for...
Some incentive, isn't it?
Huge incentive for the players, big for the supporters, and fantastic for the directors, because we were going to generate some money. So I can remember, you asked me, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent now.
It's okay.
Bob, it was one of those games where I couldn't do anything wrong. And we had one attack, from what I can remember in that match. We had one attack. Maya Dennehy went down the right-hand side, crossed the ball in, header from Bernie Wright, stunned silence all round the ground. This was halfway through the second half, and it just been a constant barrage our way, and the ball was hitting me, I was saving it. I swear if I'd have turned round and they'd have shot at the goal, it'd have hit me on the back or something. It was just one of those days, and we ended up winning the game, and the euphoria of knowing we were going then to Old Trafford. And I can remember walking the baseball ground. When you came out to go back to the coach, there was a very narrow alleyway when you came out of the dressing room, and there were no press rooms or anything like that. And Arthur Cox was the manager of Chesterfield at the time, and I walked past him just as he's given his, they're answering the questions of the press, and I can remember him saying, we'd be going to Old Trafford now, but for that expletive walking down there then. So I took that as a terrific compliment.
How was Old Trafford?
Fantastic, absolutely. Now once again, we played there, I think 2 years running, or 2 out of 3 years. And we drew at Old Trafford. I think it must have been the first time. We drew at Old Trafford 0-0, and Man United were flying, and we brought them back to Walsall and beat them 3-2, which was fantastic. A couple of years later, or the following year, we went there again and lost 1-0, but we gave a really good account of ourselves. So those were 2 terrific FA Cup ties, and a lot of the fans of my age group, and perhaps a little bit higher, but would remember those days very fondly.
So you're standing on the goal line, you're looking out, and there's Manchester United.
Yeah, loved it. Loved it. You know, players at the lower level, if they're that way inclined, can't wait to get out on that pitch to play against them, just to see how you do. Well, I was fortunate enough played in internationals, and for me to a certain extent, I could handle it probably a little bit more, but some of the younger players, it was great for them, and some do well in it and some don't do so well. Some can handle it and some can freeze a little bit. But on that day, the team that went out really did well.
I've talked to 1 or 2 people who remember you well in your football playing days.
They're very old. Are they old people?
Well, they've probably been around a little while, dare I say. One of them said to me, his phrase was, "Oh yeah, Kearnsy, the master of time wasting." Sounds a little harsh, or is it?
Yes,
you're buying time there. You see,
I knew how to I knew how to waste time without it being too obvious. I think when I see goalkeepers today booked for time wasting, I think to myself, you're not clever enough. You've got to be clever to do it. And there was yes, I agree. I'll have to say there is a little bit of an art in it. But I thought I could waste up to 5 minutes a game.
Really?
If needs be.
Well, as you don't play anymore, you can tell us how you did this.
Well, little things like if somebody threw the ball back from the crowd, I'd always make sure that I was trying to get my body in between me and the referee, and as it's thrown back, I'd throw it back into the crowd, or just go to pick it up and accidentally kick it forward because I got my foot, the stride of my foot going for it, just go away from it, and then run, but run very, very slowly, which can be less than walking pace. Things like that. You can look as if you're hurrying up, but
did some
I'm giving a bit of an art way now.
Yeah, this is good to learn. Did some referees come up and say, "I know what you're doing"?
No. No, because as they would be running up towards me, I'd kick it.
First bounce and over the goal. Yeah. But I mean, to have spent so long at a club as you have done as a player at Walsall. I mean, I know you You did have little bits of end of seasons, didn't you, at other end of your career at other places. But you became, you said that when you arrived, how much you liked the feel of it.
Yeah.
And you clearly, it's still got that family feel, the community feel about it, hasn't it?
Very much so, because after I finished, I took a job outside football, but still retained I was still employed by Walsall Football Club because I took the goalkeepers, coached the goalkeepers, but then a job that was too good really to turn down, which was the steward of Aldridge Conservative Club. And once again, I was so lucky there because I thoroughly enjoyed that job. Now, unfortunately, my wife at that time became very ill and tragically died of cancer in 1990. And I could no longer fulfill that role at the Conservative Club. And at that time, the community job was coming available at Walsall. And Barry Blower called me in the office one day and said that he wanted me to consider becoming Walsall's first community officer. And it was too good a job to turn down because Barry had sold it in such a positive way to me. And I went on to complete 24 years as the
He sold
community.
it well.
He certainly did. And what was brilliant about it, between him and Roy Wally, I had a blank canvas. And I used to get advice, particularly from Roy, and I built it up to be one of the best community programs in the country, and that's something I'm really proud of. And if I'm proud of anything at Walsall Football Club, it would be the pride in establishing a very successful community program.
The great thing was, you see, when you picked the phone up or you went to see somebody, you didn't have to introduce yourself, did you? They instantly knew. And they would have had a story for you. That
was a considerable advantage, I do have to say, that I would go to schools, I would go to associations in the town, and once I said who I was from Walsall Football, oh yes, so it opened doors for me and made life easier in establishing that programme. However, it did take a lot of work and a lot of hard work, and now the club are really benefiting from it.
And up until quite recently, you combined that with being the goalkeeping coach as well.
Yes, I did that as well as running the community. I found it very difficult at times to combine the two. However, I worked hard at it, and I think one or two goalkeepers would say that I helped them in some way, particularly Jimmy Walker, I would like to think.
Do you not miss being out on the field and training field with them?
Yes, I'd have to say that I do. I miss that, and I miss the dressing room banter. Now, if you talk to all professional footballers when they retire, I'm sure that's the one thing that they miss, the dressing room banter. And that's what I miss probably more than anything now. However, in my role now as football ambassador to Walsall Football Club and matchday host, I try to get out to the training ground at least once a fortnight, and I get memorabilia signed, like footballs for charities and things like that. So at least I'm going in there and having a bit of wit and repartee with the players.
Of course, earlier this year you went to Wembley, didn't you?
I did, yes. Fantastic.
Is that the first time you've been to a football match and not worked?
What a good point.
I think it must be.
Certainly involving Walsall.
You either played or you coached.
Yeah.
Or
certainly involving
Walsall.
Walsall.
Now you do radio commentaries, don't you, as well?
Certainly involving Walsall. It would have been. It's the first time I've ever seen Walsall play and not been working, because even when we went to the Millennium Stadium, and got promotion, I was working for WM.
Yeah. So what was it like sitting there? Were you in the Royal Box, were you? Or?
I think I was.
You think?
Bit of dig, yeah. So Yes, the club very kindly came to me and said, you know, you don't really want to work that day. And I said, no, I'd love to take in the whole occasion if I could. And Dan Mole, bless him, said, you know, he'd give me the day off. And
what was it like from the other side then?
It was a fantastic experience. You know, to be down at Wembley, watching Walsall there for the first time, and you know, the fans were fantastic, absolutely brilliant. The only unfortunate thing is we didn't really do ourselves justice.
No.
You know, one or two of the players didn't play up to what they were capable of. Had they done so, it would have been a much closer game. Bristol City were a very good side, but it would have been a lot closer. And really, I felt sorry for the fans, really, more than anything, that, you know, they'd come in their thousands and we didn't really put on a display. If we'd have put on a display and got beat,
that's a different thing, isn't it? Yeah. And of course, the thing is, as you say, it's been so much a community club, it's been a community you've been a part of. So it must be quite strange to have actually stepped away from it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But I put a lot of hard work into it, and with the community certainly. I had a deputy there, Adam Davey, who had been with me for a long time and deserved to take over. But the key to it was, if Jeff Bonser hadn't come to me on the retirement of Roy Wally, as he's retained his position as on the board, but retiring his secretarial duties, and then as a result of that asking me to become the match day host and ambassador for the club, I'd still probably be doing it.
It's not been a bad life, has it, for a boy from Bamborough?
Listen, I'm very, very, very lucky about how my career in Walsall Football Club. My career is in professional football, but the big plus is that I joined Walsall.
You made the right decision. Mick Kearns, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being my guest on Midland Sports Scrapbook this week. Really do appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Bob.
And let me just tell you that next week my guest will be a gentleman who played just one game for England. Many people couldn't understand how he could only be picked once, but there were one or two to choose from at the time. As it was, he had an outstanding career at the very highest level, and he is the former Wolverhampton Wanderers centre forward. I can call him that because that's what he was, John Richards. That's all to come in next week's programme, but for us from tonight, from Nick and myself, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.